I was thinking of a couple things while we're waiting for some questions to come in. One was this whole notion of in the 5 dysfunctions of team, one of them is fearing conflict.
Yeah.
One time when you were speaking at Biola, you talked about the fact that you asked a lady to go and take a piece of paper out and write on one side of the paper all the things that when Jesus was it nice?
Yeah.
And on the other side when he was more tough, because she felt like she couldn't really confront anybody because she wanted to be like Jesus.
That's right.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so she was a woman at our church, and we were talking about an older gentleman that we both knew and both really adored. And I said to her, well, I know why I love him. Kathy, why do you love him? And she said, because he reminds me of Jesus. And I said, oh, I love him, but he doesn't remind me of Jesus. Why does he remind you of Jesus? And she said, oh, because he's so kind and sweet all the time. I said, you talk about the same Jesus I'm talking about? Because when he says things like, you're not worthy of the crumbs that I brush off the table to feed my dogs, that's not nice. And really, if you go through and make a tick list through the Gospels, you will see that Jesus uses difficult conversations and conflict way more than he encourages people and prays for people. Why? Because there's something catalytic and capable of changing us from the inside out when we have to face the darkest parts of ourselves. Now, how you do that in love, how you do that wanting the best for another person, I bet if we had time right now to go around each table, every single one of you that's a leader would be able to point to multiple times when a boss has held you accountable, and it wasn't easy, it was a very awful, difficult conversation, and in the moment you probably hated it. But when you look in the rearview mirror, you think my leadership went to another level because somebody had the courage to do that. I know I've had 10 or 15 times when leaders have done that to me, probably actually way more. They're transformational moments. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, here's a question from the audience. Please repeat the definition of leadership you just used.
Sure. It's creating a way for people to contribute to make something extraordinary happen. All of us are looking for a place where we could be part of something extraordinary. So leadership is the job of creating a place for everybody to contribute so that something extraordinary happens.
Okay, and tips on how to move someone along who's not a fit for the role you hired them for.
Ooh, okay, couple of thoughts here. The first one is a long-term idea that I got to ask myself the question, what made me think they were the right fit? So I've got to look at my hiring practices and what I was thinking. That's on the back burner. The short answer is multiple difficult conversations. It's taking the time to think through, get a couple people that are a sounding board, talk through the issues, talk through the points of disconnect so that you're clear on your perceptions. Then you set up a time to talk to them, and not just one time. And you say to them, I have some observations about you and your role. Would you like to hear them? And then you take them one at a time. You give them time to respond back. And then you say something at the end of that time, whether it's 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour. Let's let this sit for a while. I'd like you to think about it. I'd like to think about what you told me. And let's come back next Tuesday at 3 o'clock and revisit this. And if they're Christ followers, I will often tell them, let's trust that the Holy Spirit will do what none of us can do in the meantime. If they're not, I would say simply, let's both percolate on this and let it sit and come back. And then you want to start to see, is there something I don't understand? Is there some resource I haven't given them that they needed? Is there something that I can do to unblock this problem? Is there another place in the organization where they truly would be a better fit? Not just moving them around to the dead elephant burial grounds in your company, okay? And then if over the course of a couple of weeks of these conversations, and if you have a big enough company that you can get HR involved in it, I would highly recommend that. Then it's time for the final conversation of, this is not working, and we need to move you out. It's difficult. It's really difficult, but it's what leaders need to do.
Okay, here's a thought. So corporate structure, Matthew 18, and sometimes I hear people talk about the fact that I need to tell somebody about this person who's not doing things properly or well or whatever they're doing negatively. I need to tell the boss. I'm not going to tell them because it's for the good of the company. And I care about the corporate structure, so this is not a Matthew 18 moment. Thoughts on how a corporate structure in Matthew 18 might or might not fit?
I think this is a tension to manage, not a problem to solve. I don't think Matthew 18 was ever meant to be a blanket statement over any time you have an issue with a person. It's really talking about if somebody has offended you. I think most often the healthiest thing to do is for two people to talk directly. There are power dynamics in a corporation that make that difficult. That's again where if you have an HR structure, they can help. What I will often do when somebody comes into my office to share about something Greg has done that they don't like and they think I should know about, I will certainly understand that sometimes people do need a sounding board, so I will ask them, who else have you talked to this about with this? Because I would really recommend that it stop with me, and I will give you some feedback, and then I will ask them, can you let me know by when next week will you have gone to Greg and talked to him about it? And I'd be glad to help with that if you need me to. So you're starting to help people grow up in their ability to talk to each other. Here's the bottom line. There are few things in life more delicious than not liking somebody and pulling somebody else aside that feels the same way and having that conversation. So at our church a couple of years ago, we were having an all-staff meeting, and one of our associate pastors was up talking about a big project that we were going to be doing, and he was vision casting for it. And I had to go to the bathroom, so I ran into the bathroom because I'd heard it before. And there were two women in the stalls. They didn't know I came in, and they were bad-mouthing him while he was giving the talk outside the bathroom. And so as soon as the meeting was over, I said to both of them, I need to see you guys in my office right now. And they walked into my office like deer with caught in the headlights. And I said, what I heard you guys say was so inappropriate. And we have to have a conversation about it, and then you have to tell me by when next week you will go talk to Jim about this. And then I did the most important thing. I said, I've done this myself. The vulnerability of, you haven't done something that I haven't done or I'm not capable of doing. And then I said, I may do it again. And if I do it, you need to call me into your office. So there's this reciprocity and vulnerability of a leader.
Well, there's one of the questions, how do you fully develop your gift of leadership? We were talking a little bit about Willow Creek's Global Leadership Summit, 350,000 people looking at that these days. There's conferences like this, there's books to read, there's YouTube videos that are by the zillions. What does somebody do who wants to continue to develop, but there's so many ways to do that in so little time?
Now, I think you had mentioned earlier that leaders are learners, and that is so true. But there are so many options now, it's crazy making. So I think it's, I look at seasons in my life, like for the next 6 months, what are the 2 or 3 activities I'm going to engage in to develop my leadership? And I try to limit it to 2 or 3 things: a mentor, a cohort group, a couple of conferences, some solitude time, a book that somebody has recommended. And then at the end of 6 months, I just kind of evaluate how do those work and what should the next 6 months look like.
Okay, here's a great one. My leadership style has been all about conflict avoidance, I know, and harmony, the kind Jesus model. Now I realize I have a team that I can't keep accountable.
I know, that's a problem, huh? But it's okay. That realization is gold. It's just gold. I just finished reading a book called Scaling Up Excellence, which I highly recommend. And he talks about a very simple equation. To scale anything, you just need 2 things: talent multiplied by accountability. That's all. It makes scaling really easy. Not easy, really simple. It's very hard. You want to get talent, you want to get people that are good at what they do, and then your job is to hold them accountable. And here's where I would start if I were you. And believe me, I'm going to tell you this because I've done it. I would sit my team down and say, I just realized I'm really terrible at something. Now, they're not going to be surprised. In fact, they're going to be wondering which of 8 things that they have in their mind that you're going to say. And then I'm going to say, I'm realizing that I'm not very good at conflict, that I avoid difficult conversations, and that I'm not holding any of you accountable, which is my primary job. So we're going to start talking about what does it mean to be held accountable? What are the good parts of that? And I'm going to hold you accountable, not just for the stuff that needs to change. I'm going to hold you accountable for the good stuff too. We're going to become a fundamentally different team. This is going to take a while, and I'm going to need your help. And I would start by teaching it, by giving examples of times in the past when somebody has held me accountable and it's really helped me, even though it was hard and difficult. And then you have to start practicing it and doing it.
Okay, most important advice for women in leadership.
Don't think about being a woman. Like, who gets up in the morning and goes, I'm a woman, I'm a man? I love being a woman, but I don't spend my whole day thinking about it. It's just not the most important thing about your leadership. It's there for sure. It's an issue, but it's kind of a tertiary issue. One of the coaching advices that I find myself giving male CEOs all the time is, I understand that crying bothers you. It's just water. It's just water. There's nothing to be afraid of. When the vein on your forehead stands out, that's exactly the same essence as her tears. Or vice versa. I know women that get red and the temple vein comes out for them, and men that cry. It's just not that big of a deal. In the book Scaling Up Excellence, he says if you want a great team, research has proven you need multiple women on your team. Teams that have more women are more effective and more successful than teams that don't. We'll just let that stand for what it is and move on.
There you go. Well, Jesus was pretty good at asking questions.
He was. Oh, man.
There is this whole movement in the last, whatever we want to say, 20 years emerging, and we're part of it at Convene of talking about coaching. Yeah. And there's coaching that says, I shouldn't direct you, and there's coaching that says, I should. And so how do you find the plane landing in a place for a leader who has to move the company from A to Z, have people understand something is their idea, and maybe not just act too wimpy as a leader? How do you just put that all together?
I would start by looking from the perspective that I know for myself as a leader, I have benefited greatly from both approaches. From times when a leader has asked me questions, and I look back in the rearview mirror and I think, oh, they were leading me somewhere with these questions. But they really have used the Socratic method, and the learning has come out of me, and just a simple question or two has gotten me thinking. And I've had other times where bosses have used a much more directive approach, and I have benefited from both of those. I would say that both of those are tools in your leadership belt. And having the discernment in the moment to know which to pull out when. And don't worry too much about doing the right thing all the time. Do the best you can. And sometimes you'll have to say, you know, I probably should have put that in the form of a question. Or, wow, they didn't take the question. I probably should have been a little more direct with you. So my husband and I have been married for almost 33 years, and we will still start conversations out with each other like this. I have something really difficult to talk about, and I'm probably not going to say it very well. Do I have your permission to try? And that's clues for the other person to say, okay, let me sit down and go ahead and say it, and then we kind of help each other shape what we really mean.
So you and John, if I have done my reading homework well, are very different.
You know, here's the deal. We're so much alike in so many ways, but doesn't marriage just put the spotlight on the ways in which you're different? So we're different and we're alike. Yes, please continue.
So if I recall the story right, you're out on the bay outside of San Francisco, and there's the waves happening, and he's you're saying this is awesome, and he's ready to throw up over the side.
Yes.
So this whole notion of you weren't both there saying, oh, this is great. Right. He was more ready to do some more journaling, and you were like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah, so the story Greg's referring to is just sort of a journey of spiritual formation for me. You know, I'm married to Mr. Contemplation and Mr. Solitude and Mr. Quiet Time guy. And I remember being at a conference one time when Dallas Willard said, you do understand that quiet time is a new invention, about 100 years old. It's not a biblical tradition. Closing your eyes during prayer was invented during the Victorian era with Sunday school teachers that needed to control unruly children. It was sort of a new step for me to realize that the way John connected with God did not need to be the way I connected with God. And I could learn from some of the ways he connected to God, but at the end of the day, I don't know if any of you have ever read Gary Thomas's book, Sacred Pathways. He also wrote the book Sacred Marriage. He writes about 11 different ways that people connect to God. And in the book, he talks about identifying the top 2 or 3 ways that you connect to God, and those will always be your primary ways. You can grow and experiment with other ways, but really leaning into how God wired you and your primary ways of connecting to God. John and I are very different in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, how about one last question from the audience, if I'm getting this question right. How important is it to the team when a leader steps up and removes somebody? I guess the intention of the question might be along the lines of maybe this should have happened a long time ago. How important is it that you do it when you remove somebody from the team when you maybe should have done it a long time ago?
Super important, because you erode trust when you don't. Now, the team needs to see you try authentically and deeply. I have had to let go of a number of people. Almost every time I've waited 3 to 6 months too long. That's better than a year too long. It's better than 15 years too long. It's better than never doing it. Lencioni has a great phrase that the most difficult people in an organization are those who quit, but they stay. Your team, not only do you all know people like that, you've all been people like that, so let's be honest. But your leadership, the trust that people have in you as a leader, will depend on your ability to take action when somebody needs to be moved off the team. And I've seen it happen over and over again when a leader waits too long, or when a leader really works a great process that's very honoring to the other person, but at the end of the day makes the decision. And most often the whole team is saying, yeah, we were wondering when that was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, if the average CEO that's out here right now could hire you and then you'd come to their office, what's the thing you find the most with clients that needs work that they could go back to their office and say, if I just began to work on this, I'd make some good progress? Maybe a blind spot.
Well, actually, I would say be the CEO. Stay up at the high level in the organization. Your job is to integrate the whole. That's the executive function. If you get too deep down into the weeds, and of course, you may have to every once in a while for a short period of time because of a crisis, but CEOs that drop to the level of doing the work themselves instead of staying on top and building into your people, empowering them, getting obstacles out of their way, asking them what they think. When I got hired for this new role 9 months ago, I told the board, here's what you need to know about me for you to decide if I'm the right person for this job. I'm simply never the smartest person in the room. I said, depending on the room, sometimes my husband walks into a room, he might be the smartest person in the room. I said to the chairman of our board, I'm guessing almost there's not a room in the world where you wouldn't be the smartest person in the room. That's not me, and if that's what you need, don't hire me. Here's what I do. When somebody walks into a room that's smarter than me, I'm not intimidated, I'm curious. And I want to ask them questions, and I want to learn, and then I want to ask them if they would sit right next to me and help consider the possibility that if we work together, something we can't even imagine would be possible. Be the CEO of the organization. Don't lose track of that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad you were available, and
Thank
thanks
you.
for coming and joining us.
Thanks.
Join me in thanking
Thank you.
Nancy.
Thank you for having me.